This is the Ready Set Podcast, and here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Hey, how was your week, you fucks? Welcome to Ready Set Podcast number 31. What a show do we have for you this week? We are now live on all of our podcast platforms, YouTube, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Well, another crazy week in politics. The impeachment trial is finally started. Some crazy opening arguments, and are we going to have witnesses? That's the question, and who knows? By the time this airs, that might already been answered. Outside of that, that's basically what's going to dominate this week. It's just going to be impeachment, but we got you covered on the podcast. There's some politics, but it's more about that wonderful progressive Democrat, bubbly, smart woman named AOC. Anyway, let's get to it. A Minnesota appeals court strikes down a revenge porn law. TikTok is now banned on Army-issued government phones. A Party of Five reboot is coming. It's woke, and Disney's paws are all over it. Homeless women in Oakland are squatting for housing rights. And in the staff report, AOC, our bubbly progressive Democrat from the Bronx, is a hypocrite. This is your one-stop shop current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Are you ready? Set podcast! Well, it must be nice to be a woke Disney employee working within the ranks of the TV division of said company. For those that don't know, Disney and Fox made a deal last year giving Disney and ABC Fox properties from movies like Deadpool and TV shows like The Simpsons and another popular 90s Fox sitcom called Party of Five. So originally, Party of Five was about 5 white kids being orphaned from the parents' unexpected death, causing the older siblings to be thrusted into parental roles that create high dramatic and sincere situations. Perfect for TV in the 90s. So when Disney buys Fox and they have all these new TV properties now, apparently there was some, I don't know, this is just me talking shit basically, but some TV exec that was like, hey, we can take this Party of Five show and reboot it into something way more woke. So this person thought it was a great idea to reboot this show, but with more of a contemporary spin. Something only, like I said, the mouse would do. So the parents are dead. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. The parents aren't dead in this new woke version.
And that's
they've been deported.
Ready Set Podcast.
So if this was an Obama-era minority family, would the parents have been droned? Oh, what's that? Our anti-Democrat contributor, Steve Carangello, says even under Obama, they still would have been droned. So it's on Freeform TV, which is Disney's family-friendly channel, which is kind of odd. So they've clearly laid out the demographic for this TV show. I didn't realize a lot of minorities and, what's that? It's probably not minorities. They're trying to indoctrinate young white Democrats, young white suburban kids with Democrat ideals? Didn't see that coming. That's probably not a thing at all in Hollywood. So this show is clearly made for urban coastal cities, not for anyone in the middle of the country. That's who they're basically making this for. I don't think anyone in fucking Lincoln, Nebraska gives a shit about, the plot of that show. So Disney knows that there's a large swath of people that can't afford to go to their theme parks, buy their merchandise, or even go and see their overly produced CG'd comic book, movies, and animation projects. But hey, at least they made a TV show for you. So the U.S. Army has banned members from using the Ocular Video app on government-owned phones. I don't know if that's a typo or not, but Ocular sounds really cool, so we're going to roll with that. So TikTok is, for those that aren't hip like me, TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. It actually used to be called Musical.ly. I think it was like music.ly, and I don't even know what it was, but whoever owned TikTok bought Musical.ly and turned it into TikTok. So that means so it's a Chinese company, which means the communist Chinese Party, the CCP, is embedded into the inner workings of the company. So now there's a little bit of a hidden story in that. So the way the Communist Party works in China is if you're going to do any form of business, if you're a company from another country, if you're a company that was formed within the country of China, or if you are a state-owned enterprise, an SOE, as you might see. So no matter what it is, there has to be a division within your company that has the Communist Party embedded into it. And TikTok, being a Chinese-owned company, has the Chinese Communist Party embedded into it. Therefore, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have called for stricter regulations among concerns that the app might be used to collect data on Americans. And for example, last February, TikTok had to pay a record $5.7 million to settle allegations the company was illegally collecting information on children under the age of 14, such as names, addresses, and their locations. I'm not saying that's the Chinese government, but either way, they were storing and collecting that data, and they were doing it illegally. So the Chinese are everywhere. They're spying on our naval bases. They're attempting to meddle in our elections by cutting back the amount of sorghum they have been buying from the Midwest farming companies that support and voted for Trump. Oh, wait, well, that's right. We did just sign that Phase 1 trade deal a week ago, so I guess it's really not that bad. But either way, you can't trust the Chinese. And what I find very curious about Chinese nationals who visit America is that they're never from China. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, me being in the retail industry my whole life and in the food service industry somewhat down here, you tend to run into some people from Asia, China. It's pretty obvious. They don't speak any English. I can tell the difference between the Japanese language and Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean. I have a little trouble with the Korean language because it's very similar in the way it sounds, I should say, because I'm definitely walking a tightrope here. I'm watching you, Kenny. I see you got your finger on that soundbite button. And what's very interesting is okay, so this will probably get me in trouble, but I'm going to do it anyway because I need to make an example of what sounds from someone speaking a language sounds like. But when you walk up to a table and you hear and you ask that person, oh, where are you from? And they say Los Angeles. It's just like, what? Huh? So you mean to tell me you're from the United States, but you don't speak English? You don't know the value of our metal coin system? I swear, one time I walked up to a table, there was a lady with a penny, a nickel, a dime, and a quarter, and she had an app on her phone that was telling her the value of the coins. But she's from Los Angeles. And then you have 5 bags of luggage you're walking around with that screams, I'm an international traveler. I wouldn't be surprised if the Communist Party puts out these talking points memos for traveling Chinese nationals that says if they're asked, they are to claim they are from an American city. Why? I have no idea. China, its citizens, the whole continent of Asia has this culture of deceptions and untruths. I can't explain it. But Russians, Koreans, Chinese, Indian folk all have this culture where they're not really always upfront with everyone about their true motivations. Fuck it, Chinese.
And that's Ready Set Podcast on Twitter in care of Joe Persinger at 420 Chicago Avenue.
Well, I definitely probably deserved that one. All right, so Minnesota their appeals court's up to some stuff. A few weeks ago, we talked about how the New Hampshire Supreme Court chose to not take up, that the Supreme Court, not the New Hampshire Supreme Court, the Supreme Court decided to not take up the Free the Nipple case, which rightfully the Supreme Court declined to hear the case, is what ended up happening there. I think I updated us on that one last week, I think. So just to clarify here, the Free the Nipple case was a city ordinance that bars the showing of the female breast with less than a fully opaque covering any part of the nipple. So 2 other women, Heidi Lilly and Kia Sinclair, were busted 3 days later while burying their chest at the same beach in protest of the original person's arrest. Okay, so the The women challenged their convictions all the way to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, losing every step of the way, and they challenged it to the Supreme Court, and they said, no thank you, rightfully so. So, we have the Minnesota State Court of Appeals ruled last December that the state law is unconstitutional and infringes upon First Amendment rights. So let's break that down really quick. So that sounds about right for a state that has nothing but liberal Democrat lawmakers. Oh, the irony. So the court ruled that the state law was a broad violation of First Amendment free speech rights, that it couldn't be fixed by limiting its ruling and scope. So in other words, the law was written with such broad sweeping language that it's impossible to change it within the language that was already used. Or in further layman's terms, your teacher is telling you to redo your homework because it's getting an F, because it's nowhere near the mark. So according to court filings related to the case, so let's break down what brought this on. Because usually when a court of appeals rules against the law, it's because someone appealed it and said, hey, this is fucked up, do something about it. And in severe cases like this is what happens. So here's what brought this on. Here's what brought this appeal on that eventually got this law repealed. Yeah, that's right. So Michael Anthony Casillas was arrested for using his girlfriend's passwords to access her accounts after the relationship ended to obtain sexual photos and videos of her. He threatened to release them. She later received a screenshot from one of the explicit videos that had been sent to 44 recipients and posted online. Yikes. A little side note here. Does anyone remember about 6 years ago when I think someone hacked Jennifer Lawrence's J-Law's iCloud and put all those photos of her online and stuff like that? I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you can find it. But whenever I see that woman do a movie, all I can see is that picture of her having a load blown on her face. I'm sorry if anyone is offended by that. But that is the nature of it. I've seen these photos. I can't unsee it now. And I can't even take her I can't take her seriously professionally anymore. She's just like a porn star. Anyway, so given that, I can understand how the importance of these laws. So anyway, back to this jerk-off that we're talking about. The defendant, Mr. Casillas, attempted to use his First Amendment right as his core defense, only to be rejected by the judge in the original case and sentenced to 23 months in prison. Almost 2 years for posting a video. Think about that. Now, take all the emotion out of it. What he did wasn't right. That's not what we're trying to say here. But what he did, because remember, First Amendment, freedom of expression. He posted a video online and got almost 2 years for it. So what's next in Minnesota? Social credit scores? According to Fake News ABC, a known arm of the Democrat state media, also known as Fake News Disney, the judges called the defendants, the appeal judges, called the defendants' actions abhorrent. They said they concede the dissemination of private sexual images can cause significant harm. So the court went on, this is basically what they said. We'll go with that. Quote, in throwing out his conviction, Judges Michelle Larkin, Peter Reyes, and Randall Slider, I probably pronounced that wrong, Slider, it's just spelled like Slieter. Anyway, said the state's revenge porn statute has the potential to cover conduct that is constitutionally protected, such as sharing images that appear in publicly accessible media with the consent of the people depicted. Specifically, they said, the statute lacks a requirement that prosecutors prove an intent to cause harm. Now, here's another example we had from last week. Intent crimes are hard to prove. In order to prove an intent crime, you literally have to have that person's hand in the cookie jar. And not just in the cookie jar, their hand has to be around the cookie. So it's a very hard case to prove. Intent crime cases, that is. They said the language allows for convictions even if the defendant didn't know that the person depicted did not consent to the distribution of that image. And they said it allows convictions when the defendant didn't know that the person depicted had a reasonable expectation of privacy. I'm not going to lie, a lot of that language is kind of over my head, but it sounds like what they're saying is, I don't even know if I'll be able to do that. It almost sounds like you can get fucked for not realizing something was the case. Someone will probably tell me I'm a fucking idiot, but whatever, it's right there. It says the person depicted did not consent to distribution of that image. It allows convictions when the defendant, the person in trouble, didn't know the person had a reasonable expectation of privacy. So in other words, they're basically saying the way you guys wrote this law is very Stalin-esque. So instead of taking the loss, like the St. Paul Democrat chief author of the 2016 law should, John Lesh, called on the state's attorney general and accused abuser Keith Ellison to appeal the decision's state Supreme Courts, citing other laws have withstood constitutional challenges elsewhere, most recently in Illinois. So all I have to say to that is, hey, dickhead, just rewrite the law, you fuck. This is the current state of our country right now. We have East Coast female hippies who want to frolic around to the Northeast beaches naked. Now, I'm not entirely opposed to that, but that is a slippery slope that will create men who want to do the same and probably attempt to extend that right to their local gym or Toys R Us pop-up store. And in this liberal blue cake box republic, you have state lawmakers writing laws that you'd find in a similar situation in China. Liberal Democrats are the bane of my existence. So California is slowly turning into a socialist state, just like Minnesota, except California is way more closer to that, to a socialist state, I mean. There's America, and then there's California America. And with the lack of housing and skyrocketing taxes, extreme state environmental regulations, coupled with high-paying tech jobs, long story short, it's a shit show in California. Drug use, mental health issues, homelessness are now staples of the California culture and economy, and you residents of such a wonderful state have Democrat lawmakers and federal representation to thank. I mean, no wonder California, Illinois, Washington, and other Democrat-run blue states are bastions for wealth and success for all. Well, maybe not. Dominique Walker, 34, moved her family from Mississippi last year, but couldn't find any housing in the pricey Oakland market. Really quickly here, little something I noticed the article kind of fails to go into. She moved her family from Mississippi, where rent and land is probably the cheapest in the country. Last year, knowing the state had a multitude of systemic social problems and some of the highest rent and land prices and taxes in the country. I smell a PR stunt. So this lady can't find a place to live. So what does she do? She finds a house and squats in it. Never mind the fact that she could move back to Mississippi. The newly claimed, or somewhere else that's cheap. The newly claimed home is a 1908 house that has one bath and is 1,500 square feet. That is tiny. Tiny. I mean, I lived in Phoenix and we had a 650 square foot apartment and it had one bathroom. So that is just above double of that. Yay. So there's just one problem here. Wedgwood, the company which bought this home for $500,000, took possession days after the squatters moved in. Sam Singer, the company's spokesperson, said, Wedgwood owns this home, and these squatters have broken into it. They're illegally occupying it, and that's not the right thing to do. It's simply theft, Singer said. This is really a case about a group of people taking the law into their own hands. And that's correct. The business rightfully owns a property and the house that stands on it. Maybe the company would be nice enough to develop and build a new home and let the homeless folk use a GoFundMe let the homeless folk go fund enough funds so they can remove the house off of its foundation and prop it up on a sidewalk in Skid Row. That's not a bad idea. You GoFundMe, you tell people, hey, I want to take this house, you got to move it. I mean, the homelessness laws is such lawlessness, you could probably take a trailer or a house off its foundation, put it on the side of the road if it fixes. Ain't no one going to do shit. I mean, there's this other option that exists where she can find a market that better suits her financial needs, like somewhere in Alabama where she was living prior. But I'm sure there are similar markets around the Southwest area, whatever, like Phoenix, Tucson, Mesa, Casa Grande. I could keep going. But instead, she's taking the law into her own hands and trying to use some kind of socialist Nazi practice in some kind of hostile takeover of a home she isn't paying taxes on, let alone not even putting 5 on it when it comes to the purchase of the home. Okay, let's suspend belief here and say the state or this judge rules in favor of the squatters, because that's kind of what's going on right now is they're waiting for a judge to rule. I mean, the fact that they have to wait for a judge to rule on this is just maddening in its own right, but whatever, we're going to suspend belief and say that the judge or the state rules in favor of these squatters. And honestly, there isn't much of a suspension of belief there. Are they going to have to pay back the company? What about the property tax? How the hell are they going to afford that? Common sense says the judge who is going to rule on this squatter case should and will rule in favor of the company that rightfully paid for the house. I mean, that's capitalism. But this is also the same state that is in a circuit court district that ruled that forcing someone off a park bench or a sidewalk is something akin to a depraved indifference. Or was it cruel and unusual punishment? It might be both. Like it matters, because that ruling basically allows skeezy homelessness fucks to sleep on benches and sidewalks and business entrances, goes against any common sense. And a lot of that is related to a district court ruling. I think there's a ninth district court out there that came from a liberal activist judge that basically says if a city doesn't have any homeless shelters available, they can't kick someone off of a public space because that's for sleeping purposes, because that's cruel and unusual punishment. No, what's cruel and unusual punishment is the fact that an activist judge can put a ruling out there like that and the Supreme Court won't even take it up. That's cruel and unusual punishment. So it's not really crazy to think that this judge will rule in favor of the squatters, which would send that state into complete disarray and chaos. It will essentially turn California into a lawless, homeless dystopia. Squatters will take over your house, streets will be rivers of shit and piss, and the state won't be collecting any tax revenue. It will be, excuse the pun and phrase, a shit show. All right. Well, that Uncle Joe's Lemonade, they have not been paying their dues, so we're going to skip over that commercial and get to something that's literally hits a little bit close to home, sort of. Wreckage from a missing helicopter touring the Nepali coast in Hawaii carrying 7 passengers, that could have been me at one point, was found a few days after it went missing just after Christmas. 7 people, 2 believed to be minors, perished in the crash, both from 2 different sets of families. Which almost kind of tells me either these people were visiting. No one really flies into Kauai. I mean, maybe they do. There are some resorts there, but it's almost its own country within a country within a country. I know that makes no sense. You got to be there. So I'm almost wondering, and this happened on a Thursday, I believe. So that's the day Norwegian Cruise Lines gets into that port. So I'm curious if these 2 sets of families were, sightseeing, and that's the end of that. I have found no information on that, and no one's reported that if they were from the cruise line, so maybe they weren't. Anyway, 25-knot winds were blowing when the chopper had left. The cause of the crash, actually, it has been discovered. They said there was very low visibility where the plane was flying, and they crashed into the side of a mountain. And this happened on Kauai, like I was saying, which this was the chopper tour I was definitely considering going on during some time off on Thursday or Fridays. Those are the days that we would be in that port on the island of Kauai. But I'm not taking that helicopter cruise anymore. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm one of those 7 had I made a different decision. Who knows? But we're going to pour the proverbial 40 for those 7 lost souls and skip the captain's log this week. I mean, who knows? I might just cancel the segment altogether. Damn it, I don't have any paper to throw. Son of a bitch. Anyway, let's get to the staff report.
In my hand, I hold the staff.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a hypocrite and a deadbeat Democrat who won't pay her dues. At a Venice Beach rally in California during the holiday break, Crazy Bernie had a rally featuring his superstar endorsement from New York Rep AOC. And this wasn't too long after the Democrat debate in December where Pete Buttigieg accused progressive Democrats of issuing purity tests they can't pass or something like that. I mean, he's basically a leftist in a moderate garb. But, well, anyway, regardless, the progressive wing of the Democrat Party had a response to that, and AOC took the mantle. She decided to speak at Bernie's rally and basically had this direct shot to levy at Mr. Do we have that clip, Klaus?
For anyone who accuses us for instituting purity tests, it's called having values. It's called giving a damn.
Boop, boop, be-doop.
It's called having standards for your conduct.
Oh, really?
To not be funded by billionaires.
Oh, really?
But to be funded by the people, which is different.
Is it now? Well, that's very interesting. So here's what Bubbles fails to disclose here. So during her 2018 campaign, where she came out of nowhere, she accepted a donation from billionaire who is now running for president, Tom Steyer. How much, you ask? Oh, interesting. She received what appears to be the maximum contribution of $2,700 from Mr. Tom Steyer in August of 2018. But I thought she said she had values. I thought she said it was about having values. What happened to having standards for your conduct? Is that out the window when a billionaire progressive starts throwing thousands at you like a stripper dancing on a pole? Is there really a difference at this point? Boop, boop, be-doop. Then there's this gem of a genius from the suburban, urban Brooklyn representative. That's AOC, if you're wondering. She goes on to say, I go into work all the time and I hear people saying, what will my donors think? I see billionaires get members of Congress on the speed dial and waitresses don't, okay? There's a difference. Boop, boop, be-doop. Yeah, whatever you say, Bubbles. Whatever you say. So then there's this. There's the DC. Oh, God. I don't even know what it stands for, but it's the DCCC. We're going to call it DC Cubed versus the AOC affair that is now brewing. So the DC Cubed is, that's D and 3 C's if, anyone doesn't know what cubed means. I barely don't. I almost said squared. Is the financial arm of the Democrat Party that funnels money into federal district elections. So every member of the Democrat Party has to kick in a certain percentage of their donations to the DC Cubed to spread the wealth, if you will, in other races in the party. Now, I actually don't know if the Republicans do this or not, because I really want to call the DC Cubed a bunch of socialist fucks. I'm afraid I'm going to get boxed in because the Republicans might do that. So, whatever, I kind of get what they're doing there. You want to spread the wealth. I think Beto got a kind of, that's happened with Beto, actually. I don't know if he was supposed to spread the money around based on his dues or not, but he raised a lot of money from his Senate campaign, and they asked him to spread the wealth, so to speak, and he said no, because he was going to use all that to run for president, which we all know how that ended. So the dues are actually based on tenure and position within the party. So, for instance, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is the number one Democrat right now, and she has to kick in about $1 million. It's a lot. That's a nice chunk of change to spread the wealth. Maybe they could kick me $1 million. Yeesh. Anyway, AOC, however, hasn't kicked in a dime. Nada. Nothing. And she owes $250,000. So she feels that due to the blacklisting of vendors who helped progressive candidates, she shouldn't have to kick in. So one of the things the DNC did, that's the National Party, so in order to prevent people like AOC from getting elected into the Democrat Party, they basically said, if you are a third-party vendor, Is that how it works? Basically, so let's put it this way. I'll simplify it even more. If you're not helping the Democrats directly and you're helping the progressives, you're going to get blacklisted. That's basically what it is. So instead, she's going to donate her money directly to progressive candidates that she endorses. Now, what's interesting is to watch how the old guard of the Democrat Party refuses to admonish her for this position that she's taking. I mean, they are clearly scared of AOC, or they're spineless, or it's both. It's probably both. So what you're telling me is a social democrat who constantly berates the media about how we should share the wealth has decided to not share the wealth. So I understand the hill she is going to die on, but regardless, that stance goes against one of her core principles, sharing the wealth. In fact, sharing the wealth is the foundation on which her political house was built. Her goal isn't to take on Republicans and enact a progressive agenda. Well, maybe that's further down the line in, a phase 2 plan. But her phase 1 plan is clearly to blow up the Democrat Party. And I'm, not opposed to that. Because if people like her are running in general elections, we're just going to be electing Republicans like the South was electing Republican Democrats back in the 1780s. Is that right? Okay, maybe John Adams was a Northern Democrat. Or they didn't have factions back then. Regardless, I'm tangenting here. So, like I said, if that's what they want to do, fine. You can run up one of these progressive Democrats in the general election against a moderate or Republican, and you're going to lose every time. But the thing is about liberals, their ideas are great. They're just not electable. And she wants to pull the party further to the left, making any Democrat in the national campaign extremely unelectable. Good luck with all of that. And if I had to guess here, the New York State Democrat and the National Democrat Party have two ways out. She gets ousted in the primaries this year, or when the census report comes out, they will probably redraw her district, taking her out of an immigrant-poor area that wants socialist policies into a more suburbia-style district with Wall Street and Main Street persons that reject socialism, but still vote for the blue team. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Democrats are going to deal with that. And that's a staff report.
We're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day.
The staff reports.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for listening to Ready, Set, Podcast. Don't forget to check us out on our Facebook page. Give us a like and a follow. We're also on Spreaker, same thing. Give us a like and a follow. Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review. And don't forget to check us out on CastBox, Podcast Addict, and Google Podcast. This is your one-stop shop, current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Thanks for listening. Share the podcast if you'd like to support us, and we'll see you next week, you fucks. Thanks for listening to the Ready, Set Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and look for us on our YouTube channel, Ready, Set Podcast.
Tell me something